I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old on Old. And this week, we're going to be looking at one of the scariest movies of all time. I'm talking about 1973's The Exorcist. So, if you guys are new to this series, what I do every single week is I break down a classic film I've never seen before. I talk about its historical context as to why I consider it a classic and why it's sort of held up today, or maybe it doesn't hold up, because I also transition over into my thoughts. And looking at it from a 2018 viewpoint, looking at it from a movie, sort of seeing it at the very first time, I decide if I think, it should be still sort of considered a classic. You can't always take away the historical relevance, but if it sort of holds up and it sort of should be praised as a classic in a lot of ways. I've covered a breadth of genres and movies, and this one is sort of one of the big ones. I've been saving this one kind of for the Halloween time here, but also because this is my final episode of Old on Old for now. I will be doing it, sort of restarting back up, I believe, in March, but right now we're in the middle of the Oscar season. We're not in the middle of the beginning of the Oscar season, so I'm going to go into Old Oscar Countdown. That should be a lot of fun, and really sort of go back into the deep dive of the Oscar season. But I will be missing this series. And The Exorcist, this is a big one that I haven't seen. And if you don't know the plot of The Exorcist, it's about sort of a woman who sees sort of gradually her child become sort of acting more erratically, more and more and more, and then she keeps on going to doctors, psychologists, normal doctors, and no one can sort of figure out what's wrong with her. So when she sort of goes full sort of insane, she has to be strapped to her bed. She relies on an exorcist because she thinks, a demon or even the devil himself may be possessing her daughter. And this, at the time, was a huge deal. This is one of the highest grossing movies of all time. It's in the top 10, adjusted for inflation. I think, if you count the initial run, or even with sort of the re-releases, the domestic total on this is like $900 million. So almost, think of something how, Black Panther just cracked $1 billion. Well, that was worldwide. Imagine a movie cracking almost $1 billion domestically. That'd be a huge thing. It was, this is back in the film industry where worldwide totals weren't as big, so the domestic total was a lot more important. So for this movie here, just imagine it being such a huge phenomenon that literally everyone you saw had seen it, or was wanting to see it, or had seen it multiple times. It was one of those things. We see this sort of transition, the shift in the mid-70s with something like Smokey and the Bandit, which is the same year as Jaws, but then this came out really sort of a couple of years or a year before. Really, Jaws was maybe one of the big things, and then Star Wars really sort of launched into the high pedigree. The idea of the genre filmmaking, the studio film, sort of coming back into fruition in a different kind of way. We look at something like this movie, which 1973, so it happened earlier. No, but it is sort of the evolution that we see. We always think of the 70s as this sort of amazing auteur period, which it was, but really early 60s as well. Don't forget the 68 and 69 Graduates, Easy Riders, Bonnie and Clyde, 67, things like that. But this is sort of emblematic of the 70s as well, because we see these really huge hits that are genre movies. That, horror movies used to be the B movies, the Jaws, that's kind of a horror, used to be a B movie. But now they're being sort of these huge, massive successes, these, the summer blockbuster release created with Jaws, but these huge event films really kind of started in this area, and I think The Exorcist is one of those, because it was such a big deal at the time. Just like Jaws or anything like this, or any of the big movies nowadays, it's being covered on the news. People, you see the news footage of the people lining up in the interviews of how, it scared me so much, it's the scariest movie I've ever seen. So imagine sort of having that tagline and having that amazing word of mouth, the scariest movie you have ever seen. And a lot of people today still consider it the scariest movie they've ever seen. Someone like Linda Blair, who plays the girl, I've heard stories that, she can go outside or just into public without people literally running away from her because they were so scared. And I think that's a testament to the actual relevance of the film today. This is a film that has sort of surpassed the classic ability. We talked about Smokey and the Bandit a couple weeks ago. And that movie was big at the time and sort of stayed, especially in the southern states. I wasn't raised there, so I don't know sort of how influential that film was. But from a personal standpoint, I never really, Smokey and the Bandit never put too much emphasis on it. However, The Exorcist, it always had something big on it. It was always something that people had seen or told you to see, or, oh, you want a scary movie? See The Exorcist. See, this is a classic, a really great movie. One that has stood the test of time, not only being a big success at the time, but also standing the test of time. And then it's actually just a side note. William Friedkin directed The French Connection in 1971, then directed this in 1973. I mean, two amazing classics and great films, kind of like Francis Ford Coppola with his sort of Shriek of the Conversation, and then Godfathers Part 1 and 2, and then Apocalypse Now. It had sort of this amazing sort of window. William Friedkin had this great window too. I know he did Sorcerer after that, which I haven't seen. He hasn't gone sort of off the radar, but he was never as high as this. He did like something like Bug or Killer Joe, which are good movies in their own respects. And one more I'm thinking. To Live and Die in LA, I think, was a good movie. I haven't seen it, but I think I've heard good things about that. And I think he directed that. Point being, it's almost impossible to top something like The Exorcist, because one of the highest grossing movies of all time, critically acclaimed, genre defining, literally. It was just such a very sort of fascinating time for the director, for the time in the movie sort of going conscious, particularly in the States, because it's not that much of a worldwide thing back then as it is, say, today. And overall, it was just a huge phenomenon. I really wanted to get that. It was a big deal. So Connor, transitioning into my thoughts, Connor, why haven't you seen this movie? First of all, I have to explain my relationship with horror films. I think that'll be able to explain it. Really, it's kind of a dueling factor, but it's only really one factor. But one part being that I just don't like being scared. I don't like that feeling. I feel like a lot of movies, the story doesn't exist, and the story's just there, and the film's just there to set up to scare you. I don't feel like there's. I don't feel attracted to that in a sense that I want to be scared. I don't feel that sort of sense of urge. And then a lot of ways, because the films a lot of times are designed to be just scare machines, the story falls to the wayside, and then they don't focus on a lot of stuff, and there doesn't seem like there's a lot of effort into it. I mean, a lot of the times, very cheesy dialogue, the reasoning for why things happen don't make sense, the acting can be suspect. There could be a lot of problems with the horror movies, because they're pretty much like always going to bring in cash. Blumhouse has made literally a huge studio about that, making movies for no money, and then the horror movies are going to make money no matter what. So that's kind of an issue I find. Not to criticize Blumhouse, I mean, they've done amazing things. So I just think that sometimes the quality isn't there, and then I don't really like getting scared, so I never gravitated towards the horror movie. But with a movie like The Exorcist, because of these series like this one, Old on Old, or Masters of Controlled Chaos, I'm learning some more about these classic horror movies and actually really enjoying it. And despite this being the scariest movie of all time, I'm never really attracted to the scary parts. Actually, I think some of the scary parts in this don't hold up as well, and can be seen kind of as corny, but I still, don't get me wrong, there are some very genuinely scary moments, but it wasn't as scary as, say, maybe, I don't know, even The Shining, or something like a modern day movie, horror movie like Hereditary or The Invitation. I think The Invitation is maybe a bad example, but Hereditary, where just personally, I sort of am more scared by that than this, and I think maybe some of the effects and whatnot don't hold up as well, but I'm actually really interested, because I'm interested in more dramas and comedies and thrillers and action movies, those genres. I'm interested in the story, and I really appreciate the dueling stories that are going on here. Very interesting. So you have Chris, the father of the girl who's getting exercised, exercised, I guess. Yeah, I don't know how to say it. Exorcist. Okay, anyways, she's the one that's getting the demon taken out of her. How about that? She's sort of dealing with the fact that, similar to Picnic at Hanging Rock, the world as we know it is not as it seems. In Picnic at Hanging Rock, who we talked about last week, or, we talked about in the Peter Weir episode, we talked about Witness on the old episode. Anyways, if you watch the Peter Weir episode, I talked about this. The idea of, you're looking at these sort of figures, the girls in the film are looking at these figures, the teachers, as the sort of saving grace. So when they don't know what happens in the murder of that film, or the disappearance, sorry, in that film, they don't know what to do, and they sort of go crazy. Similar with Chris here. I mean, we've sort of set up the idea that, don't worry, the dark ages are over. People don't die from the flu anymore. There's someone who studied years for this. There are smart people out there that can help, in case of an emergency or in case of a disease or whatnot. So when she takes it to all these doctors and they say, I don't know, it's so heartbreaking. And it's just what she recognizes, that they don't know what they're doing. It's sort of breaking down the walls that she has to resort to, sort of in old style, sort of 1600s kind of under the radar method, that being of exorcism, and sort of just seeing her girl change in front of her eyes, and it's almost like losing a loved one, and there's nothing she can do about it because there's no control. Just the idea of having no control over fate, no control that, hey, she has this disease, you have to fix this by doing this. That's sort of settling. But when there's no reason, it does make it an unsettling thing, which works very well for the theme and the tone and the atmosphere of this movie, which makes it sort of scary in that part. I mean, the movie is partly scary, I'm not going to lie, but it wasn't sort of incredibly scary the way maybe it was at the time. You have to keep that in consideration, of course. And then also the other dueling stories that of Father Carras. He's sort of dealing with the guilt and sort of regret and self-doubt of his mother dying by putting her in a home. So he's dealing with that, and then he almost doesn't know where to turn. He tries to turn to religion, but he's struggling with that because, for a lot of times religion can sort of create the idea of, faith, or the idea of guilt, and sort of being self-doubting yourself, so you have to turn to it because religion is so confident. But then again, if you don't do this or this, you will go to hell. The idea of guilt that he's experiencing with his mother, but also the guilt he's sort of having with his relationship with the church because he's a priest. So there's a lot of sort of inner turmoil going on with him that I really appreciate. That's why he returns to the story and really focuses on so much that. So that when Max von Sydow's character comes in, he's telling him all the facts because he's been obsessing over this, but his character says, we'll figure it out, we'll go along as we go along. And that's kind of interesting aspect. I think the story of this film is very well done, and I think that I haven't even talked about any of the technical moments of the film. But if you're looking for a scary movie, not the scariest movie of all time, that's maybe too high of a pedestal to live up to, but if you're looking for a scary movie with a really interesting story, interesting examination of characters, and their sort of concept of faith in whatever, or losing hope, or trust. There's a lot going on here, and I know there's some visual imagery I haven't been able to touch on. This is an amazing scene, for example, an amazing shot. But anyways, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Like I said, this will be my last Old on Old. I'm going to be putting 100% of my creative effort into Old Oscar Countdown, so stay tuned for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. That's sort of my signature series, and I'm sad to see this one go. Before the others, it's like the other ones, I was like, okay, I'm glad to move over to the Oscar season, which I am this year. But really, this series, I'm most definitely going to start up again if all goes well, because I do miss the series, and I will miss the series, I think. But I'm excited for Old Oscar Countdown. Stay tuned for that. I'm doing some great things this year, trying to work with the format to make it a little more relatable. Stay tuned for that. That's about it. I hope you guys enjoy the episode, and until next time, stay tuned.